Hello, welcome back to Down to the Tyre. This is part two of the Jake Sanson episode, so enjoy.
It's funny, I've taken a lot of criticism for boosting the egos of some of the females that are now on the scene in sort of Formula F1 Academy and Formula Regional and F4 and whatever. But it doesn't matter what these people say to knock these people down. They're looking at their results in F4 and feeling underwhelmed. But you have to take it into the context of what they've done in karting when they have been on an equal playing field with the guys, with the same equipment, with the same opportunities, with the same money, essentially. That's when you really get to see what the talent can do. And it doesn't matter what people say to me, I will never be anything other than impressed and supportive of what Bianca Bustamante can do. I remember being there at the Miami Asia Cup in 2020, and this goofy, gawking little teenager with glasses, with a beaming smile, with a can-do attitude. She went into that race against the guys and she wiped the floor with them. Absolutely, completely dominated them. And it was phenomenal to see. You don't really know what a driver can do until they're put in the same playing field with the same people, with the same opportunities. And people are knocking Bianca for her lack of results and her lack of ability. But what people are forgetting as well is that not only is she having to basically play catch up with the rest of the European field with not many days testing. She doesn't have an unlimited budget. People say she's got a lot of money. She doesn't. She doesn't have a massive amount of budget. She has good support and she has a good team of people around her building her up. McLaren are on side with her, but they're not paying her to be there. It's all having to come together in the right frame. She doesn't do as much testing as a lot of the other drivers on the grid. So she's obviously behind the curve in that sense. But also she's coming from the Philippines. There's one racetrack in the Philippines, which is not FIA grade one. There's no chances really for a driver from that part of the world to have that kind of standout ability that early. You've got to give them some time. You've got to give them some grace. And she's being thrust into the incredible bubble that is Formula One at still, only 18. She's still very, very young. There's a lot of the drivers in F1 Academy this year who are a lot better than people are giving them the credit for. The results only tell you a portion of the story. And I think people, they believe everything based on the result at the end of the race. And it's very funny. They will judge a woman by their result a lot faster than they will a man by their result, because there's always a reason why the man didn't come in the position they should do when they've got the pace. With the women, it's always they're not good enough. And I don't stand by that. I've seen plenty of competitors in an even playing field. Some amazing talent over the last few years. Lola Lovinfoss, when she was in Miami Euro in Miami, France, was very, very fast as the French guys. You've got to look at a lot of the talent that's coming through. Hamda Al-Kubaisi, when she was in F4 UAE, there was a race at Yas Marina where she got a jump start penalty for 5 seconds, and then she got a track limit penalty of 5 seconds, trying to pull out that 5-second gap that she needed to win the race. She ended up pulling out 10.2 seconds, enough to win the race by 2/10 in the same cars as everybody else. That's tough. That takes a massive amount of character. And people are very quick to forget the achievements of the women climbing up the ranks. They're very, very quick to assess them based on what they're currently doing, but not what they've done so far, what they've currently had to do to get to that point. And it always amuses me that a lot of grace will be given to the lads coming up the ranks, but not so much will be given to the girls coming through. Unless they're winning straight away, they're not good enough. But everybody, as I've said before, develops at a different rate, and you have to assess them based on context. And this thing that we seem to be having an issue with at the moment is not just equality in motorsport. We're struggling to find a lot of equity in motorsport. And I've said this to a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And people are like, well, what are you talking about? Go and look up the word equity. And I think you'll find that's actually what we're trying to find in motor racing a little bit more than the equality argument. Equity is what we really need. I think the fact that there is such a thing as the F1 Academy, which a lot of people are going to see as, deliberate segregation of women away from, an equal playing field, which I see both sides of the argument of. As an emotive motorsport fan, I do feel that there shouldn't be a championship for, purely for women. I think, the car doesn't really care what gender you are. If you're fit enough, if you're competitive enough, if you're determined enough, then you should be able to mix it on an equal playing field with the men. But I do also feel that, in 2024, it's only really in the last 3 to 4 years that people have started to actually consider that that's a possibility. For many, many decades, women have been told you're not as good as the men. And it's been ground into them by the karting dads. You know, you still see it in the karting paddocks. I've been there at the side of the road when one of the talented female drivers goes into the top five and the dad gets worried about it, turns to the lad and says, "You're not being beaten by a girl." That's ridiculous. That's outrageous. And the fact that that's still being indoctrinated into a lot of the karting paddocks around the world, it shows you the extent of the problem. It's happening from karting and it needs to change. Fortunately, what the guys at RGMMC are doing from the end of last year onwards, the Champions of the Future Academy, what Susie Wolf is doing to kind of bring more women to the even playing field, is actually really, really game changing. I think it's going to take some time. None of these things can happen overnight. Unfortunately, you're not just changing opportunity, you're also changing mindset. And I think the mindset is going to take a lot longer to change for a few, unfortunately, ill-minded, uneducated people than it is for the opportunity. Those things are going to take time. And there are still, you know, idiots, as far as I'm concerned, who believe that women are not capable of running at the same level. As far as I'm concerned, if Danica Patrick can get pole position in NASCAR at the Daytona 500 and can lead the Indy 500 and out hoodwink Helio Castro Neves at Motegi 2008 on fuel strategy and beat him in a fair fight, then anyone can. It's about opportunity and it's about determination. It's about focus. It's about re-education. It's going to take time. You know, we're not going to find a woman who can be in Formula One tomorrow. It's still going to take some time. And I still feel that we're probably going to be waiting at least another 5, maybe 10 years. But the very fact that for the first time, we're willing to try and find someone, we're actually talking about it, we're actually engaging people in conversation. This needs to happen. Maybe F1 Academy won't be around in its present guise 3-4 years from now. I would love there to be a situation where Liberty Media thinks, well, maybe we need to buy Formula 2 and Formula 3 outright. Maybe those 30 cars on the grid in Formula 3. Maybe the fact that there are 3 cars in the team in Formula 3, the third seat should go to a woman. You know, maybe those kind of arguments can start. Maybe those sort of conversations can eventually start happening. But these things take time. You know, you've got to let people start thinking, okay, this isn't just something that's a possibility. This is something we're going to do. My personal opinion is that, you know, the only way we're actually going to do a proper job of it is if we have somebody along the likes of a PHM AIX, a team that is purely designed to get women into the hot seat. So you have a team in Formula 2, a team in Formula 3, a team in Formula Regional, across every Formula Regional championship. Every F4 championship has a female driver's team. And people will say, oh, but then that's, you know, exclusivity, only giving women a chance in that particular team. That's favoritist towards the women in that particular seat. Well, do you know what? They've been anti-women for a hell of a long time. I think the only way you're going to create the society, the community, the culture that you want in terms of the equality of motor racing is to create opportunity. The only way it's going to happen is if you create opportunity. It's happened since the 1890s in motor racing. It doesn't happen unless there's an opportunity to allow it to happen. And I feel that segregation isn't the answer. Maybe artificial opportunity is, but the only way we're going to get to that stage is to give people, the kids in particular, the chance to think, you know what, I can do this. And that's the only way it's going to change.
I think it's so important the change comes from the grassroots level, hence why the Champions of the Future situation that they're introducing is so good, because you've got to, if you know, if we are going to see a woman step into a Formula One car one day, they've got to believe they can do it from the start. Like they've got to, because otherwise I feel like if women only see it at a certain stage when they're a bit older than the karting level, they're always going to be playing catch up, and that is a problem that we've seen. A lot of drivers have been really harshly criticized for their age doing F1 Academy or even doing other series like FRECA, and I feel like you said with Bianca kind of playing catch up, it is the case that a lot of these women are slightly older because they are just a step behind, because they maybe didn't see it at as young of an age as the male karters did.
I mean, the sort of the comparison I think it's worth drawing at the moment is you've got to look at the Lionesses. You know, it's only in the last 5 years, really, in football that the Lionesses, the current team, and the players that have been part of that outfit for the last sort of 5-6 years or so, it's only really now in 2023, 2024, that they've really started to see the progress made. They're actually really starting now as a sport. Women's Super League is finally becoming, standing on its own 2 feet, a proper sporting competition. And there are still Neanderthals who still feel, oh, well, it's not proper football. Of course it's proper football. It's played by human beings, 22 of them on a field, and the game is played exactly the same way. Of course it is. It's just different, and therefore you don't like it because it's different. I tend to find, actually, having been a sort of a semi-back seat football fan for the last sort of 30 years or so, occasionally watching it when the mood takes me, watching the women's game is so much more entertaining. It's so much more of a spectacle, so much more of a show. And you can criticize and go, well, the goalkeepers aren't as good, the defenders aren't as good. Yeah, but the entertainment factor is amazing. As far as I'm concerned, a decent football match should have a 5-4 score. If I'm sat there for 90 minutes and I only get 1-0, 1-1, I've wasted 90 minutes. If I'm actually going to get a decent show out of it, then why not? And the Women's Super League gives that. It's going to take time. As I said, the Lionesses, a lot of the players that have basically been, instrumental in getting the current stars their fame are never going to reap the benefits of that fame. Look at people like Alex Scott. Alex Scott is a phenomenal athlete and has done more work than most people in football over the last 20 years to establish that the women's game has merit, has, an authority. She's never going to be the A-list superstar. That A-list superstar probably hasn't been discovered yet. That will happen in about 5-6 years' time, maybe. But that doesn't change the fact that she's one of the most instrumental people within the game. I get to talk to a few different people within different sports, and particularly in the women's categories, it's the people that lay the trail. They're the ones that are going to be the ones doing all the hard work. Look at people like Alice Powell. Look at people like Sarah Moore. Look at people like Susie Wolff. These are the people that are laying the foundations for the next superstar. How long is it going to take? 5 years, 10 years, maybe 20 years. But these are the ones that are going to be remembered by the people who know, just how hard the job actually was to make it happen. They're not going to be the ones that reap the benefits. Maybe the 15 drivers currently on the F1 Academy are not destined to get to Formula One. I certainly hope a few of them are. I would love to see, the likes of Dorian Pain, Maya Berg, Abby Pulling. I felt that she was Britain's best chance for a long time, and I still feel she is. Bianca Bustamante, she still has a chance. She's 18. Goodness knows what's going to happen to her career in the next 6 to 7 years. People still make their Formula One debut in 25, 26. Don't write them off before they've had a shot. These things could happen, but even if it doesn't, you can't deny the importance that these particular athletes have in changing the mindset. Maybe the next woman isn't going to be in Formula One until 2028, 29, 2030. But the current 15 drivers we've got on F1 Academy should be lauded, should be praised, should be applauded for just how hard they are doing, how hard the work is to change the mindset of people to think, this is genuinely going to happen. This is going to be a revolution. It may not be them that directly benefit from them in the long term. That doesn't mean it won't happen.
Absolutely. I was literally just thinking this is such a fitting conversation for the fact that it's International Women's Day tomorrow as we're talking about this. I'm so glad that we touched on this topic, and I just completely agree with everything you've said. And if, people saying, well, these 15 drivers aren't going to make it to F1, but whatever. But if these 15 don't exist and aren't in the spotlight like they are now, there's not going to be another 15 coming up.
Correct.
Take those places.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm a father of 2 daughters. I want them to live in a world where they can aspire to whatever it is that they want to achieve. If my girls turned around and said, I want to be a racing driver, I want them to feel like they can go and achieve that. If they want to, go and be a politician, I want to feel like they can be in a world where they can go and achieve that. If we have this diatribe, this indoctrinated view that women can't be racing drivers, then of course it's never going to happen. We need to change the narrative. We need to make sure that people are aware of the fact, actually, you're wrong. We have had societal structure and communities changing their viewpoints over the decades and generations. That's how we've started to cure things like racism. It's how we've started to cure sexism. It's how we've started to, change the mindsets of all sorts of different things. And, it's still a problem. It's still rife. We've got so much work still to do. It's funny, I was watching a Formula 3 review from many, many years ago. This would have been mid-90s. A female driver, I forget which one it was, had an accident, and the narrator of the review basically said that the driver was returning to their car. They were returning to put the steering wheel back in the car, as is commonplace. But the narrator said, well, the driver went back to go and find her handbag. It's like, come on, seriously. Then this is only in the mid-90s. It's like we've still got so much work to do. We are literally just scratching at the surface. I kind of feel that at the moment we're in an iceberg situation. We literally have just the top of the peak is what people are seeing. There is so much work to do. We've got a long way still to change people's minds. The industry has got to accept that this is going to happen. I don't think it's a case of, oh, what if it never happens? It's going to happen. You know, there are enough passionate people out there who are willing to put everything on the line to make it happen. So my opinion is get on board. It's like Alex Scott said at the end of the World Cup, you know, shame on all of those broadcasters, shame on all of those stadiums that, you know, are now begging for Women's Super League to have a role and part of it, because you're going to miss the gravy train. I feel that it's the same for World Motorsport. You need to get behind this now and stop kind of thinking, you know, oh, well, it might not never happen, because it's inevitable. You can't stop the winds of change, and it is changing. I see it all the time. It's still got a lot of work to do, but it's getting better every year. And I'm delighted to see that it is changing for the good.
Obviously, in F4 UAE, you saw Dorian Pan taking it to the podium spots. She even got a race win at one point, I believe. I'm
She did.
actually doubting that as I said it, because it's so like unbelievable, because she has very little experience in an F4 car. I honestly am so impressed by the fact that she's stepped over from endurance racing and has taken to single seaters. You'd think she'd raced in single seaters her whole life. It's incredible.
Yeah. And the fact that she's now gone straight into F1 Academy at Jeddah and banged it on pole position for both races against drivers who have been doing single seaters for 2-3 years. You know, I do feel it's early to say it because it's only March 2024. But if the current trajectory that she is on continues, you know, give it 3-4 years, she may be ready to be the next woman in Formula One. I've seen her working program. I've seen how strong she is in endurance. I've seen how quickly she has been able to adapt to the world of single seaters, and the work she did with Prema when she was out in the UAE, it was phenomenal. You know, she was the kind of driver who left no stone unturned. Any doubts, any questions, she needed them answered. And that's the kind of mentality that we expect of people like Lewis, like Max, like Charles. You know, it's that same sort of mentality. Whether the talent is going to be the same, obviously, it's very early doors. But to have the right talent, you have to have the right mindset. And, you know, she's definitely going in the right direction. Will she be the next Formula One driver, you know, for the female persuasion? I hope so. I know, I really hope so. I think she's got the ability to continue to progress in that same speed. I just hope that the world of motorsport gives her the chance, gives her the grace, gives her the opportunity to do it in her own stance.
I hope so too. She honestly just whether she makes it to F1 or not, I think she is, and as well as the rest of the F1 Academy grid, they're just so incredibly inspiring. I think Dorian has just blown me away, like
Mm.
just with how naturally she's taken to it. And it feels early to say, but I do just feel like F1 Academy, the title this year, could be hers. I really do.
Well, let's put it this way. You know, we've just come off of the back of the Bahrain Grand Prix, where a lot of people have criticised how dull the racing was. Just think how exciting F1 Academy could be by comparison to Formula One. We might get a lot more exciting racing there than we might get in the main thing. And you know, it's the same in Formula Two, Formula Three. The racing's been fantastic. You know, you can criticise these youngsters making their way up the ladder all you want, but the racing's way more entertaining at the moment than Formula One is.
I always tell people this when people are complaining about how boring F1 is. I'm like, okay, do you watch F2? No. I'm like, you can't complain then. Go and watch F2 and then go and watch F3 and then go and watch
Yeah.
F4.
But it is funny, you know, people are criticizing Formula One now in 2024, the Bahrain Grand Prix, looking at, you know, oh, Max was 18.6 seconds clear of Sergio Perez. It's ridiculous. They clearly have very short memories, or they don't read a history book. You know, when I first started watching Formula One in 1992, you know, Nigel Mansell, the first race of the season at South Africa, I think he won it by a minute. You know, he was that far ahead of everybody else. And I don't remember everybody going, oh, well, Nigel Mansell, it was just boring. It wasn't boring. He was magnificent. And I think people, you know, are very quick to criticize the dominant force in Formula One. You know, they knock Schumacher's title running dominance because it was just so boring. When Vettel was winning all the time, it's so boring. When Hamilton was winning, it was so boring. When Verstappen's winning, it's so boring. Just enjoy the incredible display of athleticism, of sporting excellence. You know, you never really get to see too many people in one lifetime be so impressive for such a long space of time. You know, Lewis and Max are the greatest drivers of their generation. There's no two ways about it. And I do find it fascinating. We have got two. Usually you only get one driver that good in their generation. But the fact that we've got Lewis and Max, who are literally the two greatest racing drivers of the current generation in Formula One history, I think it's a real privilege. I think, you know, what's going to be really exciting for me is how long it takes Lewis to get back to the top. You know, how long can Max sustain this? I find that a really fascinating narrative at the moment. You know, Formula One fans need to be very, very careful about criticizing the current show in Formula One, because actually we've gone through phases of dominance since the beginning. You know, 1950s, we had Alfa Romeo dominating for 2 or 3 seasons, then Mercedes, then Ferrari, then Lotus. You know, and then it's just continued all the way through. McLaren have had their period of dominance. 1988, people talk endlessly about the Senna and Prost rivalry, but that car won 15 out of the 16 races. Sounds a bit similar to what we had last year with Red Bull, you know, and people were quick to mock it. Formula One is Formula One. If you don't like it, there are many other forms of motor racing out there that'll, you know, tempt you with overtakes every 5 seconds. Just go and look for it. It's there. But if you want to celebrate the best of the business being the best, Formula One will do it.
That's exactly, to be honest, what this podcast is all about, because I don't really touch on Formula One itself that much unless I'm talking about a feeder series driver who I think is going to get to F1, because I feel like the rest of the motorsport world is so underappreciated compared to Formula One. But at the same time, I feel like F1 is what it is. It has always been this. This period of dominance isn't something that's just popped up after 2021. Obviously, 2021 was a crazy F1 season. That that wasn't normal. That doesn't happen very often. That title fight right down to the last round. But with F1, it is what it is. There's not really a different motorsport series that does what F1 does the way F1 does it. Appreciate it for what it is. Watch it for what it is. If you want to see some overtaking, here it is. Here's F2, totally. F3, all the rest.
That's it. It's like, you know, this weekend we kickstart the Super Formula season out in Japan. It's my favorite championship I get to commentate on. And the thing I love the most about it is, you know, you do not know from one race to the next who's going to win. There's very few championships left where you can say that. And as a result, you know, I bang the drum on my Instagram and on my Twitter and on my Facebook. It's like, look, this is, honestly, I cannot tell you how excited I get about Super Formula and Super GT out in Japan. The racing there is done the right way. It's run and regulated the right way, because everybody has the same car like Formula 2, but half the field have Toyota engines, half the field have Honda. So there's that little bit of extra competition woven into it. So both engine manufacturers want to beat each other. And it's these little things that make the racing so exciting. You just don't know from one race to the next what's going to happen. And I think that is what people want from Formula One, and they get frustrated when they don't get it. But that doesn't mean that the competition isn't out there. It's still there in the wider motorsport world.
I've been wanting to ask you about Super Formula. To be honest, I can't believe it's taken me this long into the episode to ask about it. But obviously, Super Formula, we've got, for the past 2 years, actually, I was going to say we've got quite a few drivers stepping over from F2 to do Super Formula this year. But even last year, Liam Lawson did. How do you think those two drivers, obviously, Iwasa and Pourchaire, are going to do in Super Formula? But then also, Ritomi Miyata has stepped over from, he's done the reverse, from Super Formula and Super GT to F2. How do you think those 3 drivers are going to do in their different championships?
It's a very good question. Teo Pourchaire and Ayumi Iwasa coming into Super Formula, I think will be a really interesting narrative, because last year, Liam Lawson stepping into Team Mugen as teammate to Tomoka Najiri, it was very similar in narrative to when Lewis Hamilton came into McLaren alongside Fernando Alonso at the beginning of his career. It was a very similar vibe and a very similar feeling. And myself and Jamie Klein, we were talking about it all season long. This has 2007 vibes, right down to the fact that Ritomo Miyata stole the championship off both of them in the same way Kimi Räikkönen did with the McLaren boys in Formula One. So it had a real F1 2007 feel about it last year in Super Formula. I think Ritomo Miyata will win races in Formula 2. I really do. I think he's that good. I mean, he is only the 5th driver in history to win Super Formula and Super GT in the same season. And he's certainly the youngest driver ever to do so, which is a phenomenal thing to say about a young driver. I think he's Formula One material. I really do. I think Ritamo Miyata actually has an opportunity. If there is going to be a chance for him to get into Formula One, it's going to be a very vague left field deal that happens. It's going to take one of the teams in Formula One to go a bit rogue and think, you know what? Miyata might actually be the real deal. I think he is. I think he's got the tenacity. He's very, very similar in vibe and in feel to me to Max Verstappen or Lando Norris. He's got that very youthful, does a lot of training on his esports, does a lot of simulator work, brings that a lot into his analysis, brings it a lot into his data. He's a bit like Max and Lando in that he basically lives on his sim when he's not in the car. So he is the kind of driver who is really making waves in international motorsport. I think he's got the tenacity. It's going to take him a little bit of time, but I saw flashes of it in Bahrain. You know, he was up there towards the top 10 in terms of lap times and in terms of sector pace. He's slowly finding it. It's going to take him about half a season, I think, before he really starts winning. But by the end of the year, he could be a bit of a Zane Maloney. He could be the kind of driver who could, you know, do the double. I think he's got the potential to do it. How Teo gets on is going to be make or break for his career. I think this year in Super Formula is going to determine whether he's going to be a Le Mans or IndyCar driver, or whether Sauber will give him the gig to race alongside either Valtteri or Zhou Guanyu next year. It's a very important season for him, which is crazy when you think he's only 20. That's bonkers. But he's been in Formula 2 for 3 seasons now and won the championship in his 3rd year. So in terms of ancient history of Formula 2 drivers evolving, he's got to make use of this year. And that's tough. That's a lot of pressure to put on him, especially now that Zane is winning races in Formula 2, because now that's 2 options for, you know, State Kick Sauber to actually go for next year. I think Teo will do as good a job as Ayumi. I think it's going to be very tough to separate them. They're going to be very, very tricky drivers to separate. But then you've got a lot of drivers for them to try and go up against. You've got Kenta Yamashita, you've got Tomoka Najiri, Shotsuboi, who's going to be very strong now. He's moved from Injing to Toms. That'll be really interesting. That could be a title attack. But there's a lot of gaps on that grid, you know, with Lawson now being the reserve in Formula One for Red Bull, and I'm still calling them AlphaTauri. I don't care. There's also, you know, Ria Hirakawa's gone to McLaren as their official reserve, and that's a big hole to fill. This year is going to be very tough on the rookies, particularly for Pourchaire and Iwasa. There's going to be a lot of pressure on them to deliver straight away, and they'll either sink or swim. I think based on what Teo did in Formula 2, I think he will be the first one to be out of the blocks ahead of Ayumu. But I think by mid-season, Ayumu could be winning a lot of races. So it's tricky, and it's hard because in Super Formula, you never win more than about 3 races a year anyway, because it's so competitive. It's so tough. So again, it will come down to not what they do when they win, but what they do when they don't. You know, how many times will they finish in the top 5? That's what's going to be the real test of it. Plus, this year in Super Formula, we've also got Juju Noda, and that's a really interesting story. She's only 18, the youngest ever driver in the championship, the only woman ever in the championship's history. So there's a lot there to unpick. I think she's going to have a ridiculously tough season, but a lot of the season, I think she will sadly be at the back just because she hasn't really come through the single-seater route in Japan. She's done a lot of it in Europe the last 2 years, and making the jump straight up from Formula Open to Super Formula is, you know, a bit like going from a gentle walk down the street to the 100-meter sprint in a day. It's so difficult to make that jump. But if she gets on top of it, if the tests go well, if she manages to make the sector changes, it could be what re-galvanizes her career. You know, she has the chance to turn this around. So there's a lot to keep an eye on in Super Formula. It's going to be a very competitive season.
I definitely, going into this F2 season, obviously Jeddah qualifying didn't go too smoothly for either Carlin driver, but I definitely went into the season with I'd say my top 4 for the F2 Championship before we'd seen any racing. This was actually even before testing, but we all know testing can be a bit misrepresentative anyway. But Ollie Behrman, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, Victor Martins, and Ritomo Miyata. They were like my 4 who I thought were going to be up near the front. And I still back that with Miyata, but now I kind of wonder if I underestimated Zane Maloney a little bit. I did not expect him to come out at the start of the season like that.
I think we all did. I think we all underestimated Zane. You know, again, he's one of the drivers that I knew back in the karting days, and he's always had that amazing ability to turn a situation around to suit him. But he comes from the same stable Ricky Flynn Motorsport, which is the same sort of team as Lando Norris, as Logan Sargent, as Zhou Guan Yu. So he's definitely learnt from the right people. I think he's definitely got what it takes now that I've seen what he's been able to do with this new car. But this happens a lot, you know, when you've got a new car at the start of a season and the Formula 2 car is brand new. Some drivers just click with the new machinery better than others. And it's kind of that reason that made me think that Andrea Kimi Antonelli was going to be so strong this year, because coming in as a rookie, not having the problem of other drivers knowing the car better than him, you know, it's a completely fresh sheet of paper for everybody. From what we saw in Jeddah in qualifying so far, I think Prema are back. I think they're going to make their way further forward. I think what you're going to see from Kimi Antonelli this year is very similar to what you saw from Tuka Tarpanen in Formula Regional Middle East. I think it'll be a weekend or two before he really hits his stride, and then once he starts winning, he won't stop him. He's going to be that strong. So essentially for the rest of the field, it's going to be about, you know, what can you do while he's not winning? You know, because once he figures out how to do it, he's going to be very tough to hold back. And that's how he does it. You know, he just learns a little bit slower perhaps than some of the others, but then once he nails it, by goodness, he nails it. He's going to be fantastic to watch when he gets to Formula One. And I do think that's a when, not an if.
There's one thing that people have been laughing at me about on TikTok in the past week, and it was that I said that Prema were going to bounce back and Bahrain wouldn't be representative of the whole season. People were telling me I was being ridiculous, saying, no, Prema just haven't got the car right. I was like, they're Prema. And lo and behold, Behrman went and got pole. The second thing people love laughing at me about on TikTok is the fact that I said Andrea Kimi Antonelli is going to be in F1 at some point. Doesn't matter when, he's going to be there. He's going to have that Mercedes seat. Whatever Mercedes' plan is with that seat, whether it's to put him in the car next year or whether it's to, you know, further down the line, the plan has to involve him somewhere. Everyone was telling me I was overhyping him, putting too much pressure on him. I still back myself with that.
Hello to all the people laughing at Jem on TikTok. You look pretty foolish now. This is the thing. I found this a lot as well. Again, to kind of go into a bigger picture. It's been amazing how many content creators I've known in the last sort of 18, 24 months or so. And, you know, they are real followers of it, but because they're not in the Formula One paddock, you know, concrete, it's like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Just because you're not in the Formula One paddock doesn't mean you don't know what's going on. You know, guys, you know, there is a thing called perception, and people's perception is that if you're not in Formula One, you're not of value. Well, I've been in this sport for 12 years, and, you know, there's a lot of drivers and a lot of teams, a lot of championships who still seem to feel I have some value. So perception needs to change a little bit.
Obviously, we've mentioned Super Formula that you're doing this year. What else have you got coming up in 2024 that people can hear your voice alongside?
I'm really lucky this year because I've got a real diverse mixture of a lot of different things. I think if I was all stuck in one championship week in, week out, it'd be very easy to get either complacent or bored. And I love being able to hop from one thing to the other. So this year's really busy. I've got Super Formula and Super GT. For me, they are the two top championships in the world for excitement. Japan really does know how to do its motor racing. And they're both going to be on Motorsport TV, which is live if you have premium. It's not that expensive. It's about 40 quid a year. So it's definitely worth investing in if you've got it. Also, the Stock Car Pro in Brazil, which is fantastic. It's British touring cars on steroids. Essentially, we've got amazing racing over the course of the year with some really big names as well, like people like Rubens Barrichello, Felipe Massa, Nelson Piquet Jr., a lot of these big stars from Brazil. And they're all on an even playing field. Again, it's Chevrolet versus Toyota, half the grid in one, half the grid in the other. And it's terrific racing, overtaking every 5 seconds. Really exciting racing. I'll also be doing Euro Cup 3 and Spanish F4 on the same bills. So I'm still keeping my hand in the F4 and the Feeder Series ladder world in Europe. I'm really excited about moving into Spanish F4. I did Euro Cup 3 last year, but now I get to add Spanish F4 to it as well. And it's quite nice because quite a few of the drivers from F4 UAE are coming with me. So they're going to get sick of my voice by the end of the year. So that'll be good fun. I'm still doing some karting this year. It may not be the FIA karting championships, but I'm still going to be doing the odd bits and pieces. I'll be working in the Miami paddocks in Norway for the Nordic Cup in the summer and in Asia. I'm also going to be doing some work with Champion Cup Kart, which is, I think, the most publicized and promoted rental karting championship on the planet now. We're live on Motorsport TV. We'll be in Lignano in September. And it's the one form of motorsport competition that I do that you, the listener, the viewer, the interviewer, Gemma, could actually turn up and go and race yourself. You know, you don't need any license to go and do it. You don't need any proper racing credences to go. You just pay the entry fee, turn up, go race. And we literally get, you know, incredible rental karters who've been doing this for 10 years, alongside rookies, alongside the odd celebrity guest. 2 years ago, Andrea Kimi Antonelli came and did it and finished down in 15th. You know, that's how tough it is. It's a really tough form of racing, and we love it. We really do enjoy it. So we'll be doing that as well. I'm still doing my bits and pieces that I do with Daytona Motorsport. So anybody here in the UK who does the rental karting at places like Milton Keynes, Sandown Park, Tamworth, I'll still be around. I'll still be doing the odd event there, hopefully the 24 hours in October as well. So that'll be really exciting there. And I'll hopefully be doing some work in the British Racing and Sports Car Championships that we have, you know, at various places like Silverstone, Snetterton, Alton Park, Donington Park. There'll be a few different bits and pieces where I'll be popping in and doing this, that, and the other. There's a lot still to come. I'm still working on a few different things with a few other people. There's hopefully a couple more races to come towards the end of the year. 2025 and 2026, I'm already starting to talk to people about. So you never stop moving. You never stop looking for the next opportunity, the next job. You're still putting a few different bits and pieces together. I'm also going to be doing some backroom boy stuff in Formula E this year. Strangely enough, it's something that's kind of come around almost by accident. But essentially, when the broadcast goes out for Formula E and you hear the radio of Dan Ticktum or Jake Dennis or Johan Darovala, these sort of drivers, that'll be myself and another person choosing the radio that you hear. So that'll be one of the jobs I get to do this season from about halfway into the year. It's good fun. It's really, really entertaining, and you're kind of on your feet the whole time. And it's nice to give my voice a rest for a change. So yeah, it's going to be a very busy year doing a lot of different things in motorsport, and I'm quite excited about it. One of my favorite events, I'll end on this particular question. One of my favorite events that I get to do every year, which again is a very, very British event, a very, very exciting one that I get to be part of every year, is the British Lawn Mower Racing Association. And I've been doing that every year now since 2014. So this is going to be 10 years since my first event. It's a fabulous race. It's a 12-hour. It happens every year in August in Wisborough Green, about an hour south of London, in beautiful Kent, you know, God's own county. And it's the Garden of England. It's a fabulous sport. People are on ride-on lawnmowers in 3 different classes. You get people who've been doing it for many, many years and people doing it for the first time up against each other. People travel from all over the world to do it. They come from mainland Europe. They come from America. They come from Scandinavia. They come from all sorts of places to come and race. And it is like the Le Mans 24 hours in a farm. It is just incredible. Everything is shrunk down to one field. We're there at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Myself, Mark, and Last Lap Lucy, we do the commentary overnight. It's just so much fun. It's really, really entertaining. You get an amazing vibe from it. You know, you're all there because it's just a huge laugh. The teams take it very seriously. So we basically go into the night like it's the Le Mans 24 hours. We get just as much excitement from it and good banter from it. It's a fabulous event, and it just reminds you why you're doing it. You know, you can get lost in all the grandeur of Formula One and IndyCar sometimes, and you know, it can become very, very elitist very, very quickly. And going and doing an event like the BLMRA 12 hours, it just reminds you why you're doing this. You're doing it because you love it, because it's really fun and it's really, really enjoyable. Oh, I forgot to mention the only other big event that I'm doing this year is last year. We did the British Grand Prix from the Drivers Inn. I was hosting on the stage with Melissa Natu, and it looks like we're doing it again this year. So British Grand Prix this year. Come and find us. No doubt we'll probably be at Cops Corner again for the Drivers Inn. It's basically like a stage come pub, and we're there to just celebrate with the fans. So I should be back at the British Grand Prix again this year. I love it as an atmosphere. It's great to hang out with the fans, and just you're not there to commentate, essentially. You're there to just have fun, celebrate what the sport is, what's great about the sport, with the people who love it the same way you do. It's a very freeing event, and I actually enjoyed hosting on the stage last year more than I enjoyed commentating on it for the Pit Lane channel a few years ago. It was actually more fun, more enjoyable. You got to hang out with, you know, real hardcore fans of the sport, and you people who have traveled all the way the length and breadth of Great Britain to come and be there and enjoy the atmosphere of it, camping out. Some of them have even traveled from America, from continental Europe. You get so many stories and you meet so many people. It's genuinely really, really enjoyable. So on the whole, 2024 is going to be one of the most fun years I think I've ever had in the sport, and it just keeps getting better year on year.
Thank you so much to everyone who listened to this episode with Jake Sanson, as well as part 1 with Jake Sanson, which was uploaded last week. Make sure to go and check that out if you haven't already. Thank you so much to Jake for being such an amazing guest. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a 5-star review. Make sure to follow us on all social media as well. It's just @DownToTheTyre, and I'll see you next week for another episode.